To see everybody joining in on our webinar. This is a webinar on the Afghan refugee project. If you're in the right place, welcome. We expect, maybe 40 or so of you. So it is important that you be muted and also that maybe you use the chat when you have questions. As I said, this webinar is about Afghan refugee resettlement. I'm Dan Odden. I'm the chairperson of the South Central Synod of Wisconsin Task Group on Refugees and Immigration. Glad to have so many of you here. I suppose the main purpose of our webinar this evening is to hear from Sarah Halstead of the Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin. Their project on refugee resettlement is one of the avenues, maybe one of the big avenues of resettlement of refugees in southern Wisconsin. So we want to welcome her. We also will be in a minute having a greeting from Bishop Joy of our synod. But first, I thought we might begin with a prayer. Let us pray. Lord, we pray for refugees, for asylum seekers, for travelers, for people on journeys. Be with them. May they find hospitality and hope and new life. As you have opened your heart and your arms to us and to them, teach us also how to love and to serve in your name. Amen.
Hello, I bring you greetings this day from the South Central Synod and the Office of the Bishop. Our entire staff is currently on retreat with the rest of the Region 5 bishops and staff, but we are with you tonight in spirit as you join for the ABCs of refugee resettlement. I know that you are in for a very informative evening. I had the opportunity to see this presentation that you are about to be a part of tonight a couple of weeks ago when the board from LSS presented it to the Region 5 bishops. So I know that you are in for a wonderful educational evening, and I thank you for being a part of this important work. And I look forward to hearing more about your experiences and the ways that we can be sharing this work together in the South Central Synod. Thank you again for being a part of this evening, and blessings as we work together in this important time.
Bishop Joy and also Assistant Bishop Walter are off on a retreat for bishops and staff, I guess. So.
Everyone, all the assistants and the bishop are off Monday through Wednesday, all of Region 5.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, at any rate, so I just want to turn it over to Sarah Halstead. Sarah has been in the church relations liaison for Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin, and now it's also working in this program on Afghan resettlement. And I'll let her take it from here, introduce anybody else you need to, like Joe there, and also just remind us about etiquette as far as how you want to handle questions.
Sure.
Sarah?
Thank you so much. And I'll wait just a moment on the introduction. I'm going to see if this works if I try to share a video, because we also have a greeting from our president and CEO, Hector Colon. Are you able to see a video at this time, or at least Hector's face?
Yes, Sarah.
Oh, good. Well, let's see if it works with the video then. All right, we'll give it a shot.
On behalf of LSS, we are so grateful for your partnership, support, prayers, not only today, this year, but for the past 139 years. Our mission is to act compassionately, serve humbly, and lead courageously. We have over 750 colleagues who live out this mission each and every day, serving over 30,000 individuals on an annual basis, 93% of which indicate that we have improved their quality of life. Our current Afghanistan refugee crisis has moved us to live out this mission. We have raised our hands to help 200 individuals on top of the 300 refugees we are preparing to serve next year due to the new policy that will increase the number of refugees coming into our country. Usually, These refugees we serve are provided with $1,200 one time. And with that money, our colleagues at LSS connect these individuals to housing. And within 90 days, we help their children get enrolled in school and help the parents connect to jobs and resources that will help them become self-sufficient. The individuals coming from Afghanistan may need more support, which is why we are seeking donations to help them with housing specifically and other basic needs. Thank you for your generous support, and please continue to connect us to those who are willing to join you. We love you so much. Thank you, and God bless.
Well, hopefully that worked. I hope you were all able to hear. So we are so delighted to be able to be here. As was mentioned before, I'm here together with Joe Arsbecker.
Good evening, everyone.
Some more things playing here, so let me make sure we get rid of that. Okay, sorry about that. Hi, Joe. I wasn't sure if you guys could still hear that, but I had another video playing on my end, so. So Joe is with me tonight, and together we're going to be sharing the ABCs of refugee resettlement. Joe, if you just want to say hi for a moment, I'll bring up that slideshow for us too.
Yes, I will. Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Becker. I'm the operating officer at Lutheran Social Services. I'm happy to be with you tonight and happy to hopefully fill you in on what's happening with refugees and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Joe. You're a wonderful person to be able to present along with tonight. And we just want to be able to share with you what we are calling the ABCs of refugee resettlement. And it's just an overview, but hopefully it will answer a lot of your questions. As we go through this evening, we are going to be sharing three things, really. The ABCs representing awareness, belonging, and community. And as we get to the end, we'll have a bonus. We'll have a little Q&A. So questions and answers. I would invite you to go ahead and type any questions that you have into the chat function. As we get to that part of the presentation, we will answer those questions and give you all the best information that we have. And I want to have just a little disclaimer. What we are sharing with you is absolutely current as of today, as of November 16th, 2021. This is an evolving situation. So what we share with you today might be different than what's happening next week. So just be assured that we will always keep our website up to date with the most current information. But I think you'll find this presentation to be quite helpful tonight. So, as I mentioned, we are Lutheran Social Services. You just heard from Hector Colon, our president and CEO. He shared with you what our mission is, and Joe is our chief operating officer. Delighted to be able to have him join us tonight. I'm the church relations liaison. For the past couple of months, I've been kind of helping out with this refugee crisis and in fielding a number of calls and emails as people have responded to the call for help. And Mary Flynn is our program manager. I want to acknowledge her as we go through this presentation, because literally everything that I'm sharing with you tonight and that Joe is sharing with you tonight, I've learned from Mary, and he's probably learned a number of things from her as well. So we will go on with the presentation. Not sure if you're muted, Joe. I can't see anybody.
No, I am ready to go, Sarah.
Okay, excellent. So we'll have you start off with your
Yes. Good evening again, everyone. We're going to start at the beginning here with the ABCs, and A is for awareness. So by learning more about refugee resettlement and sharing that knowledge, we'll all be better equipped to share our love and support as a community in effective ways for refugees. I think also awareness will help us just stop the spread of some misinformation that exists around refugees. So the way we're going to learn together here is by asking a few questions. First one we're going to start with here is exactly what are refugees? And, you know, I think sometimes we get some of the terms a little bit confused. There's terms like refugee, asylee, immigrant, and I think sometimes they get used in different ways, and hopefully we can clarify that a little bit. And I think sometimes when they get used incorrectly, it can also kind of fuel some of the bad feelings about groups that are out there, or the misunderstandings that exist out there. You know, and so one of the things that really makes the whole vernacular, if you will, confusing is that the rest of the world uses the term refugee a little differently than we do here in the United States. So we're going to try to learn here. We're going to try to learn in kind of a three-step process here of what's different. So next slide, please. So number one, let's define immigrants. So immigrants are voluntarily leaving their homeland and resettling in another country. Two, asylees. So asylees are leaving their homeland and they're requesting protection and safe haven in a second country. And then lastly, refugees are being driven from their homeland for some reason, violence or war, for instance. They generally are seeking safety in a second country and then are resettled into a third country. Now, as I mentioned, the term refugee can be used different ways, and it is used different ways around the world. In the US, a refugee is someone who has already been admitted to the US. So they've passed multiple screenings, those include health screenings, those include security checks. In the rest of the world, refugee means someone that's seeking refuge. So we call someone seeking refuge an asylee or asylum seeker. So again, in the US, a refugee is someone who has already been settled and received refuge. Outside of the US, a refugee is looked at as someone who is seeking refuge. And just a note, our LSS Refugee Resettlement Program, we handle both asylees and refugees. So next key question, what is a refugee resettlement? What's a resettlement program? So refugee resettlement's a humanitarian effort that was between the United States and the United Nations. So after World War II, United Nations started to define what a refugee was. And at that time, the US began to make a commitment to take in refugees each year.
Thanks, Joe. So another question then might be, how does LSS fit into all that? And you know, that's a really great question. We are glad that you asked. Traditionally, refugees flee their country, like Joe said, and make their way to a United Nations refugee camp or maybe a refugee center in another country that is safe. And here you see a picture of one such camp in Kenya. Now, the word Kakuma does not stand for something. It's not the name of a city. It actually is a word that means nowhere. And it might sort of describe how someone may feel when they're in such a camp. Now, when they're there, the United Nations conducts interviews to determine eligibility for refugee status and protection. And if they're given refugee status, then a case may be selected for resettlement in a third country. The International Organization for Migration, also sometimes referred to as IOM, which is a part of the United Nations system, decides which cases are going to go where, and they also help to coordinate travel to the final destination countries. Now, it's good to know that refugees don't always have a choice as to where they are going to be resettled. The choice they have is whether they are to go when able or whether they stay where they are with an uncertain and dangerous future. Now, if they are assigned to the United States, then they go through a process to be cleared by us before arrival. The United States Department of State, Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, also called PRM, works in partnership with 9 voluntary national resettlement agencies. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, or LIRS, is one of those 9. And Lutheran Social Services is an affiliate of LIRS. We're a local resettlement agency. Now, resettlement agencies' jobs usually start at the airport when the refugees arrive. Groups like LSS do not go out and find refugees. And it's also interesting to note that before the refugees come to us, this process has typically taken between 18 and 36 months. Now, when the refugees arrive, they have permanent, legal, documented status. So they can rent an apartment, they can get a bus pass, they can sign their kids up for school, get a job, etc. And they're eligible for the same benefits and services that any other resident of Wisconsin would be eligible for, except for voting privileges. Those are earned after passing the citizenship test, which they have to do within 5 years.
So the goal of resettlement is always self-sufficiency. So refugees are expected to become self-sufficient, not dependent on agencies, churches, communities, or anyone else. And self-sufficiency means that they're working, they're paying their own expenses, they're learning English, they're obeying all the laws, the guidelines. Same thing all of us as residents of Wisconsin and the US abide by. So what services are provided? What does LSS do to provide services? Well, first off is what we call core services, those things that we would do in the first 30 to 90 days. So that would be things like intensive welcome, community integration, resource connection. Then we would do for the next 1 year or possibly longer in some cases, we would provide case management for that refugee and refugee family. In addition, we would provide ongoing support, which would more be a lighter touch, information and referral. That would take place for up to 5 years after their arrival in the US. Some of the other things we will do throughout this process is employment programs, again, trying to promote that self-sufficiency. We'll do cultural orientation, English as a second language classes we'll put on, and we'll just help with specifics, appointments or specifics that a refugee may have that we can handle kind of on a walk-in basis. So we have a good example here of a refugee. This is Omar. Omar I've met many times. He always has that great smile on his face. Omar was resettled through the Lutheran Social Services Refugee Resettlement Program. We served Omar. He came from the Kakuma camp that Sarah referred to earlier. He was fleeing Somalia. Omar now is a program supervisor with us at LSS. Wonderful guy, and he is that happy all the time.
So the current state in Afghanistan, the current crisis that we have and that most people are talking about really presents us with some very immediate and urgent needs. Due to the evacuation of so many people so quickly, there is a mix of situations. Now, some of the Afghans are refugees who were already in the process of coming here. And some of those are individuals who worked for the US in the past 20 years, maybe assisting with our own military, but now they were facing persecution in Afghanistan. And typically it would have taken them maybe up to 18 months to get here, but this fall that happened in just weeks. Some of those are not what we would necessarily term refugees by definition, but rather those who are seeking asylum. And generally, they would not have qualified for the benefits described earlier. So LSS had been in the process of preparing for their greater needs. A lot of these people do not speak English. But as soon as they receive employment authorization cards, the LSS refugee resettlement staff will work closely with them to find permanent and stable employment. However, we do know that it may take considerable time before they're authorized to work in the US and have the skills that are needed for employment. Now, as Hector mentioned earlier, normally LSS receives pass-through funding from our National Resettlement Affiliate, LIRS, in the amount of $1,225 for each case. And those dollars must be spent on behalf of the client for shelter and for safety needs, things like housing, food, winter clothing, which we're going to need soon, car seats, utilities, phones, things like that. However, at first it seemed that the Afghans who were not technically defined as refugees would not have this funding provided, and it would need to be secured from private donations. But due to some strong advocacy, legislation was introduced on a national level to change this. And as of just a month or so ago, this was approved. So Afghans will be eligible for benefits like W-2 for families that have children, or food share, Badger Care, and refugee cash assistance for up to 8 months. However, because we also expect that it will take longer for the Afghans to become employed, we also know that it may take many more months than usual to provide the kind of support that they need.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with awareness. So we'll move on to the B in the ABCs, and B is for belonging. So part of what makes LSS resettlement program so successful is how we create that sense of belonging for each and every refugee that arrives. And really, I think we need to look no further than Luke chapter 10 to learn our calling to care for others. That's Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan. You know, as Christians, we want to help and we're called to help. And boy, I can tell you over the past months and weeks, we have really seen an outpouring of help from you and others. So again, our goal is to resettle the refugees in a permanent home as quickly as possible. And really important to note is that a permanent home is different than being a temporary guest in someone's home. You know, typically our process is we'll pick a refugee up from the airport, we'll take them to their own apartment, we'll get them settled in with the basics. You know, that would be things like toiletries, kitchen items, linens, cleaning supplies, furnitures, culturally appropriate food, etc. And this collection of supplies is a wonderful way for someone to help create that belonging. So we do need volunteers, and volunteers for the program can help create a sense of belonging in many ways. So some of the things that volunteers can do, be a cultural mentor to help the refugees acclimate to the US, provide transportation because most won't have their own means of transportation, help prepare the home before arrival of the refugee, help with grocery shopping, be part of a welcoming group, organize and deliver items to the refugees' new homes. And there's much, much more that volunteers can do. Those were just a few examples. Some of the roles for volunteers do require background checks and training and some specific commitment of time. Others do not. Some might require proximity to Milwaukee, where we are resettling most of the refugees, but some can also be done from a distance. So one special way that we can help create that sense of belonging is to become a co-sponsor for a refugee family. So working with the support of the LSS team, co-sponsors can help with everything from furnishing apartments, checking in daily with the family, and just being sure their needs are met, and just being a good neighbor to the family. So full co-sponsorship would include providing financial support as well to help cover that cost of shelter and the basic necessities until that self-sufficiency is achieved.
The last part of the ABCs is C, which stands for community. And I think this really builds on awareness and belonging. The same way that we support families who are making their new homes in the US, we also strive to build community in the support system as well. We will learn from one another, and we know that what's worked well for one congregation may benefit another. Perhaps a challenge that is overcome by one family can help others to learn. And partnership models that truly work will help us to create that stronger community overall. Christ tells us that we're many parts to one body, and we need those diverse experiences and perspectives to allow us all to be able to grow in love. And by recognizing that infinite worth in each part, including the new refugees and the asylees, we will certainly experience people using their God-given gifts to serve. So now that we've covered the ABCs of refugee resettlement, let's open it up for some Q&A and see what questions you have. I'm going to stop sharing there and we'll see if there's anything in the chat. Right now, I'm not seeing questions in the chat, but that's okay. Sometimes it takes a little while before people are sure what they want to ask. So I would both allow people to write things in the chat if you do have questions, but I see someone with their hand up, so I was going to say we can unmute and ask a question just as easily. Donald, I think that's Donald Glanzer, is that right?
Right. My question is, how can congregations help support the resettlement of those from Afghanistan that are right now in Fort McCoy?
Great question. So let me address the Fort McCoy piece, just so that everyone understands how that all fits in. We're all hearing about Fort McCoy because it's here in Wisconsin and it's big in the news. Fort McCoy is one of the processing centers that they're using to do some of the things that they used to do in a refugee camp in another country, but we're processing through people much quicker and hoping to get them all into their own permanent homes as quickly as possible. Fort McCoy is the largest of the processing centers. It's bigger than the next 3 combined. Sometimes people think that everybody at Fort McCoy is going to end up in Wisconsin. That's not necessarily true. They are going to be placed where it seems to be the best fit for them and where there's a program that can accommodate their needs. So we may receive some people that have been through Fort McCoy. I think our first Afghan came from Fort Myers or another one of the camps. So it just depends as to where they get resettled. But the relationship between Fort McCoy and LSS is then that's like the processing center or like the refugee camp piece. They will still go through that process of working with LIRS and be assigned to a refugee resettlement program like ours. Just so that you know, there are a number of resettlement programs in Wisconsin. I believe there are 6. And there is one that is in Madison, Jewish Social Services. And we work really closely with our partners who are doing this in other parts of the state. To give you a little perspective, each one was asked at the beginning of this crisis how many Afghans they could take on. And as Hector alluded to in his initial message via video, we already knew this summer that we were going to be gearing up for a big increase in Afghans coming to us because of the change in administration in Washington. So at the end of the end of last year, I think we had served around 100 refugees, and we expected that we would serve probably another 200 refugees on top of that because of that change in administration. Then the Afghan crisis happened. And then they reached out to all of us, all of the resettlement agencies, and said, how many more could you take? Knowing that we were kind of vamping up for a big increase. And note, by the way, a lot of refugee programs went out of business not doing the refugee resettlement during those lean years during the previous administration. LSS made the decision to stick with it and to continue, and we're just so glad to be able to do that. So they asked us, how many Afghans could you take? And at that time, we had estimated probably about another 100. Once we knew the change in the legislation that we announced here that happened just a month or so ago, then we said we could maybe do another 100 as long as we have the support needed to be able to do that. And what does that mean and how do congregations fit in? Perfect time for that question. The more support we have, the more refugees we can support and resettle. So financial need is great. We can always appreciate that, but there are many other ways that congregations can help. Everything from volunteering as an individual, which could be done like this, on Zoom. You could have a person that connects with somebody and helps them practice their English, for example, helping with ESL, or somebody that is willing to help with their congregation. I know one of the congregations in your synod I spoke to earlier this fall, and they did a special drive and collected gift cards that they were then able to send. I will tell you that those gift cards came in so handy when a refugee came to our office this week, and he said, I have just the clothes that I wore in Afghanistan, 1 or 2 items. They're thin. It's what I wore there where it was warm, and it's starting to get really cold. and we were able to give that person some gift cards, and they were able to go get some warm clothes and some coats and some things to help them weather the chilly weather that we have. So those are always appreciated. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of an answer, Donald. Is that good? Or you have an additional question?
Just to follow, our congregation has a line item in our benevolence to synod-wide services, and LSS is part of that, or is one of the line items. If our congregation wanted to give money just solely to refugee help, or is there a special designator for gifting that we should use in contributions to LSS?
That is a wonderful question. Anytime that your congregation wants to make a designated gift that they want it to be going to a specific purpose, all you need to do is let us know when you're making that gift. It can, if you're writing a check and mailing that in, you can either enclose a letter or write it in on the bottom corner of the check that that's what you want it to go for. If you're doing a donation online, you can also make that designation to show that it's for the refugee program. So we always honor donor intent, and you have that option at any time. So thank you, first of all, thank you to your congregation for being so mindful to include us in your budget, but also for asking about how you might be able to help during this special need time. So thank you so much. I think there's a question
Sarah,
in the chat.
Yes, we do have a question in the chat. I'll read it, Sarah, to give you a short breather here. So the question is from George, and George's question is, many help wanted signs are plentiful in communities. Is there a sense that Afghanis are open to taking any job available, or do they have a sense of entitlement because they assisted U.S. military contractors? Can those in Fort McCoy get jobs in nearby communities while awaiting resettlement?
Lots of good questions in that one. Do you want to take any of them, Joe? I can.
Sure, I can start out here. So first off, is there a sense of entitlement because they served U.S. military or contractors? I would answer that as no. I mean, one thing that the refugees must do is they must make an application and receive an authorization for employment. And that takes a few weeks. So they generally don't have that when they leave Fort McCoy. So that answers the question of, can they work while they're at Fort McCoy? Most cannot. Most cannot work in a neighboring community. Most have to get resettled, receive their work authorization from the federal government, and then they can apply for jobs. And of course, there can be other situations as well. I mean, some of them might need to take English as a second language skill and develop that first, but they would be open for any job in any community once they have that work authorization. They have the same rights, the same privileges as a US citizen as it relates to gaining employment. And as you state, I think every community around our state has the need for employees. So jobs are plentiful, and I don't think the refugees will have any issue finding employment.
Thanks so much, Joe. One of the things that we've learned, and LSS has been resettling refugees for more than 40 years. And in that time, we've resettled more than 10,000 refugees. And we can tell you that from that experience, refugees are generally very eager to work. They also understand that they may not be able to start in the same kind of job that they normally would have had back in their home country. We have people with a variety of backgrounds, people that are very trained professionals, but in some cases their credentials, if you were a lawyer, for example, and you moved to another state, you'd probably have to pass the bar in that state before you could practice law there. Think about if you got your education at a university in another country and you needed to get that information so that you could prove that you had that education or those credentials. It may take a little while, but refugees generally are eager to work. They understand they're starting over, and yet they can be very, very wonderful, productive members of our society. Just a side note too, that one of the benefits we have in the United States is that we have the freedom to go where we please, to take the kind of jobs that we want to be able to take. They're grateful to have that opportunity to be able to work. They may also want to resettle in another place. And sometimes we have a refugee family or individual who's with us for a while and they get things started. They're able to kind of, get off to a really good start. And then they decide they want to resettle maybe closer to some other ties that they may have in the US or some other family members that may have come over. And that's perfectly fine. If we do that, one person put it so well, we've given them wings. We've given them that opportunity to start, and we've given them that that base to be able to do what we all do as Americans. We have that choice, and they really appreciate that. So we're happy to be able to give people a good start. But excellent questions. Thank you so much for asking, George. Now I can't see everybody on one screen, so I'm going to just toggle between the two to see if anyone else has their hand up or has a question that they would like to ask, because we are happy to answer anything that you're curious about as it comes to refugees. Okay, I see a hand now. Wilda, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your question, please go ahead. I think if you look towards the top right-hand corner of the little box where your picture is, there you go. Now you're unmuted.
Gotcha. I know that the gift cards are more generally useful and appreciated. Are you accepting any actual clothing items?
So I believe that they were accepting socks and underwear for any size at this time. That's a need that they have for individuals. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, did we still say yes to coats? I know we had an update call this morning or earlier.
Yeah, I believe we are still taking winter coats. Yes.
I have 4 winter coats for women, and I would certainly like to be able to get them.
Oh, that is so wonderful. Yeah, and we're specifically looking for winter coats that would be sizes, adult sizes, small and medium. What generally speaking, we're finding that the Afghans who are coming here are not the same kind of size as you might see many of our Wisconsin fellows sitting together at a football game, so the
I get the picture.
small and
Yeah,
the medium
that's what these are, small and medium.
Good. Thank you. So yeah, that would be wonderful. And I do want to let you know that, again, you can go to our website, which is lsswis.org. And on that website, we do a very good job of keeping things up to date, but we have a wonderful document there that's linked right on that homepage. That's called our frequently asked questions document. And on that, it provides what is most needed, what kind of items we're accepting, where they can be sent or taken. There's questions about volunteering, about co-sponsorship, about where refugees will be resettled, just so many different things. Oh yeah, can we please type the URL in the chat? Joe, would you be able to do that?
Yeah,
while
I'll get it. Yep, I got it.
Thank you. So that is a wonderful place to check, and to check frequently, because as I said, this is an evolving situation and it may be different next week. So that is a wonderful way for congregations to be able to support this ministry and to see how they fit in. I have seen some congregations who they want to be able to help, and they like the idea of sort of a mini mission trip, and being able to come over and do a cleaning day at the warehouse and organize the supplies that are there, or help to prepare one of those apartments for arrivals that are coming in. Or it may be some that just want to gather kits like that Joe mentioned, the linens for the house, or cleaning supplies, or various items that people may need just to get started. Once we know we have a particular case, a particular family, then we may know about other needs that they have, but those kits really give them the basics, just the basics to get started. So any kind of help or support that you're able to provide financially gives them the ability to find additional things that they may specifically need outside of that beginning. Thank you, Joe, for putting that in the chat. So you should be able to find that information there. I'll look for any other hands or questions that people might have.
Oh, Dan,
Okay,
Dan
Dan,
has a question.
Dan, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself though. Dan, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself though. So you're still muted, Dan. So if you can find the little button up there to unmute, we'd be glad to answer your question.
There it is.
I guess more of a comment. So at this point, items that are gathered, like you were talking about, coats, etc., they would go to the storage place in Milwaukee. So far, I only know of the one there at the office at Howell Street. Is that right? And
Yeah, so
there's some possible opportunities in the future in Madison, but that would be if Jewish Social Services has similar needs and has a storage facility. So far as I know, they're a little bit behind Milwaukee in the pipeline of people arriving. So I don't know where they're at in terms of receiving things, but those are the two options that I know about.
Right. And the address that you mentioned, Dan, the South Howell Street in Milwaukee is indicated on that frequently asked questions page. But we also ask that if there's a large quantity of items coming, that you call or email the refugee program, and that address and that information is in that document as well. But it's refugee@lsswis.org, just to help coordinate, you know, when it comes, because they may say, let's take that straight up. We do have a warehouse location. I don't have the address for that, but we can get that to you. They may say, let's go straight there. I know they're in the process of kind of reorganizing that and getting it all set up, because we're starting to see a lot of people come in, and we knew this was coming, and definitely that pipeline that you talked about is open. And people are coming. I think this week we were expecting maybe around 25 folks coming in. You know, in a typical year, we might see that in a month, right, Joe?
Yeah,
So,
correct. I mean, that would be a high month, 25, historically for us. And now we're seeing that in 1 week. Yeah.
and we know that those weeks are going to continue and continue as they're trying to get more and more people through that process. So there's no doubt that the need is great. If you're hearing about it in the news, or you've been aware of how many folks there are at Fort McCoy, there's a huge, huge need. And, you know, the more support we have, the more we can serve. So we're so grateful for, you know, each congregation or each individual that's, you know, everyone's asked themselves that same question: how can I help? And there's some real creative ways out there. So we're so blessed to have all of you thinking about that and learning along with us. So.
You know, Sarah, I might just add to that, you know, one of the most critical needs we have today is for housing. And, you know, I suspect you see this in your communities too, but I think it's true everywhere around the state. The housing market was very tight. The availability of apartments is very tight. And so our primary need is for housing. So if you do have any connections to housing or apartments in the Milwaukee area, or someone you know that might, we'd really appreciate that information.
Yeah, and not only just the knowledge of where there might be housing, but think about it. If you had someone, even in your community, that if you were going to go move into a new apartment, what would that be like? You'd probably go hunt for one, and then you'd fill out an application. And what kind of things would they ask you on that application? You know, give us your name and your address, and where do you work? And where did you live for the last few years? And think about what a refugee coming into this country would be faced with if they were filling out one of those applications. What can really be really helpful for us is to have somebody like you, who may have a connection, may know a landlord, may know someone, to say, I'm working with LSS, or we heard about this through our congregation, and they're trying to resettle refugees. Do you have a landlord that might be a little flexible? Could you work with LSS on this? Could we have the refugee family sign the lease maybe a couple days after they get there? Could we work with some, you know, being flexible on some of this? And that kind of personal connection and that tie to that person can make all the difference in the world. So this is where, you know, who do you know? Kind of, I know a guy that can help with this. This is where this becomes really, really helpful for us. Just looking to see if there are any more hands. I'm not, oh, I do see one.
Yep.
And you're going to have to help me. Is it Solveig?
Solveig. Solvay, don't put a G on the end,
No,
just Solvay.
okay, Solvay, yes, beautiful.
We, my husband and I have been involved with LSS and refugee resettlement since the 80s. And we're very involved with the last group that came in 2010. And as most of us on the screen know from recent years, that the pipeline coming into the Madison area stopped because for several reasons, but mostly because of housing shortage and the cost of housing. And I think it's somewhat frustrating for those of us who are targeted and acclimated to Madison to know just what we can do when there is less affordable housing. And therefore, then, you know, that pretty much defines how we can help. So it seems like the greatest need and the greatest way we can help is to donate dollars and give gift cards. But in terms of providing housing and setting up apartments, most of us on the screen have been very involved in doing that, and with ESL and all those, the cultural mentoring and all of that. So it's I must say it's a little bit frustrating because we want to do as Americans like to do and Lutherans like to do and care for. And we tend to like that personal touch, to welcome them at the airport and to bring them in and to supply for their needs and work with them. So we're not so much inclined to take that interest and devotion to Milwaukee. Not that we don't like you guys over there, but it's more difficult for us to have that tangible human caring environment that we want to have. So I don't know, I guess it's more a comment than a question, but what is it that you would inspire us to do other than what you've already done to become more aware and be educated about the Afghani that's different than the Bhutanese, for instance?
So first of all, you are so right. I think Joe wanted to say something because I can see you starting there. So I'll let you finish, Joe, and then if you want, I can.
No, I think you are certainly correct, and it's been several years ago that LSS did have a presence in Madison and refugee resettlement. However, because for a couple of reasons, LSS no longer was involved. The community really just couldn't support two refugee resettlement agencies. That's partly because there were fewer refugees coming into the US, but it's also partly what you highlight, that the housing market was just so difficult that it was hard to resettle folks there. So yeah, you know, in how can you help? You know, certainly we appreciate anything you would do for us in our Milwaukee resettlement operations, but we do know there's another organization in Madison as well, and maybe there's an opportunity to help and support them. It's not us, but I think you're still being a valuable resource to refugees and doing something to help our entire community. So.
Yeah, well said, Joe. Well, like I said before, we work closely with our partners across the state, and we're happy to be able to do that. I would say, first and foremost, pray. Keep us in your prayers. Keep us in your presence and your comments within your congregations. You know, please remember that as you gather to worship, to be able to lift that up in prayer and keep people aware of what's happening. Exactly as you said, you may learn, maybe you learned something today in the presentation that you didn't know before you came here tonight. And that puts you in a good position to be able to help educate people, to help people understand and to, you know, be able to support and be neighborly. I mean, Christ asked us to be like the Good Samaritan, and he says, well, who is my neighbor? It's not always who you think, you know, but how can we be loving and share that with others? So it gives us a great opportunity, you know, to be able to share that love in many different ways. And of course, we value and appreciate all the support that many of your congregations and individuals from this synod in particular have given to LSS over the years, and we welcome that, you know, going forward. But we also want to give you whatever opportunity you can have to get that hands-on approach. Maybe that is with Jewish Social Services, and they're able to give you that opportunity. Maybe it's through Zoom, you know, and maybe it's not I mean, we've done things so differently during this pandemic. It's forced us to learn, but it also has opened up some really interesting avenues for ministry. And maybe you'd be able to get to know and support and connect with an individual or family through Zoom support, you know, and maybe that gives, you could read stories to a kid, you know, help with homework, help learn ESL, you know, help answer questions, be that cultural person to say, you know, well, what is it like in the grocery store? Or why do you park this way? Or there are going to be people that need to learn how to drive, you know. There's so many different things that they may have questions about that you might be able to answer or help with just because of the knowledge you have as an American. So, you know, this truly is a think outside the box situation, but hopefully it can give you some ideas of ways that, you know, you might be able to benefit from that gift and that personal connection with somebody too. But thank you so much for sharing that. You have been such a wonderful group to be able to gather with tonight. I don't want to cut this off if you have any other questions, but if we have come to the end of that, I'll turn things back over to Dan, and we can close our time together. I don't see, oh, I do
see a question.
Fred, yes, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Fred.
Sure. Just
sure.
one question, the opportunities to learn English. I don't know how many different languages these people from Afghanistan speak, but I think probably learning English is probably really vital to everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that a lot of people, even, you know, via Zoom can help with, one of the most important first English lessons for individuals is how to say your name and your address and your phone number. Think about that. When you go to the doctor's office, when you go for any appointment and they say, well, who is this? You know, you need to be able to say your name, or maybe you're calling for help. You need to be able to say your name and your address and your phone number. So practicing that is a great ESL language. I should tell you that Mary, our program manager, has shared many times. She's worked with this program for years and years. She speaks only English. She has never learned another language. And it's not necessary that you know another language to be able to communicate. People can usually pick up on your good intent, and there are ways to kind of use sign language and to get things across, and it works. But really, immersion in the English language is vital and important. If they're only around people who speak their own language or work only with a translator, they're less likely to try to speak English and to use it when they need to. And so there's so many ways that you can help support people in their English language learning journey, and hopefully that helps to answer. Was that what you were looking for, Fred, or did I miss the boat on that question?
I think so. Just what opportunities are there? Are there university language programs that
so
translate from the
native language?
Afghan native language to English that they can be part of?
Yeah, excellent question. So when necessary, we do have access to a variety of translation services, even if it's as simple as something like using Google Translate to get some things, translated. But we also can have an interpreter for some required services. Like if you are going to the hospital, they have to find a translating service to be able to communicate with you. So there are some things that are available in their native language. But we also have a staff member on our refugee resettlement team who specifically works with ESL, and they have lesson plans and they have activities and they have things that volunteers and individuals can use to help support that language learning process. We work closely with a number of literacy councils and literacy groups as well, who do this kind of work all the time. So it's connecting to various resources. Some may be through a literacy council, a university, a book or a resource we have, or a staff member, lots of different ways.
Yep.
Thank you, good questions. I'm not seeing any more hands, but please know that you can always reach out to us. I'm going to put my email address in the chat too. Anyone that has a question can always write to church.relations@lsswis.org and send us a message, and we're either I will or another one of our staff will be able to access that and get back to you with the answer to the question that you have. Or if you're interested in learning more, just let us know. We can help plug you into the right kind of resource. But again, thank you so much for being with us tonight and for sharing your enthusiasm and asking such great questions. We will all keep you in our prayers of thanksgiving, and we're just grateful to have each and every one of you be with us tonight. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Good questions and really good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for your patience and your willingness to take time for us. I guess I would reiterate what you're saying about use some tools that are available to you to keep in touch. The LSS WIS website is a good way. What Matters, the church newsletter, will keep you up to date on future developments within our synod. And be about God's work. So go in peace, serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.